There is a peculiar kind of sorrow that visits only the pure, those whose intentions are honest, whose hearts remain open, and whose hands have done no harm. It is not the sorrow that comes from loss or failure, but the aching bewilderment that arises when innocence is met with cruelty. To be pure and to be punished for it, this is the pain only a few will ever fully understand, and perhaps, if you're listening now, you are one of them. They looked at your kindness and saw it as weakness. They mistook your patience for permission, your love for naivety, and your silence as submission. You offered them truth, and they answered with lies. You showed them light, and they responded with shadows. And yet, through it all, your heart remained unarmored, still hoping, still believing, still trusting that maybe this time they'd treat you right. But they didn't. They chose to hurt you, not by accident, but with decision. They took your vulnerability, the most sacred gift you offered, and treated it like something disposable. You were not fooled. You were faithful. You were not weak. You were willing. You were not blind. You were brave. Still, they chose to take your open heart and crush it between their fingers as if it were nothing more than dust. And now, perhaps you find yourself in the quiet aftermath, asking, does anyone see what they did to me? Does anyone care? And the answer, my friend, is yes. God does. God sees. He saw every silent moment you endured, every tear you never let fall in public. He heard the words they spoke when they thought you were too weak to respond. He saw the smirks, the betrayals, the unprovoked punishments they cast upon a soul that only ever wanted to do good. God sees not just the actions of people, but the intentions behind them. He weighs the motives, he discerns the shadows in hearts that speak light but breathe darkness. There is something sacred about innocence. It is not ignorance, but wisdom cloaked in trust. And when it is harmed, it calls out to heaven in a language that only the divine fully understands. You may not have defended yourself. You may not have spoken back. You may have walked away quietly, but heaven recorded it all. Do not mistake divine silence for divine absence. There comes a time, not of your choosing but of God's, when the scales are balanced, when those who built comfort on your discomfort are brought low, when the ones who bruised your spirit will taste the weight of the very pain they caused. It won't be vengeance, it will be justice. It won't be bitterness, it will be balance. It won't be your doing, it will be God's hand moving through time, through consequence, through the law of what is sown and what must be reaped. They thought they were clever, perhaps, that they could speak falsely about you, wound you without consequence and live untouched. But the God who formed you in love is not mocked. The God who watched your pain did not forget. They may forget the day they hurt you, but God will not forget the hour He answers it. So hold your head high, not in arrogance, but in faith. You don't need to prove your innocence. Heaven already knows. And if God knows, then one day all will be. The people who underestimated your heart will learn that what they called soft was sacred. What they dismissed as too much was the exact measure of what made you divine. They will come to understand, not because you fought them, but because God defends those who wait on Him. And now as the winds shift, as time moves forward and justice begins its quiet walk toward them, remember this: you were never alone. You were never unseen. The innocence they took for granted was never invisible to heaven. And that is why what they did will not go unanswered. God measures motives, not just actions. We live in a world where people are praised for their polished behavior and punished only for what can be proven. But God is not confined by outward appearances or limited to human standards of justice. While people see the surface, God sees the soul. And he does not merely judge what was done, he weighs why it was done. Those who hurt you may appear respectable to the world. They may smile in public, quote scripture, or claim virtue with every breath. But God searches the hidden corners of the heart. He discerns between a mistake made in weakness and a choice made in cruelty. He separates the person who stumbles in ignorance from the one who intentionally breaks another. Knowing full well the damage they inflict, this is why you don't need to exhaust yourself trying to prove your pain to others. People may never believe the depth of what you endured, but God already knows. He saw the smirk behind their apology. He heard the laughter after your tears. He watched them plan their harm behind a mask of friendship or kinship. And more than that, he understood the motive, the cold calculation behind the cruelty. You may have been called too sensitive. You may have been told they didn't mean it that way, as if that could ever diminish the pain of being wounded by someone you trusted. But what they meant, God saw clearly. He knew their heart when they acted. He read every intention like an open book. They can't erase the record, not with denial or deception, because heaven doesn't keep records in ink. It records in spirit. This is the comfort that few understand but the righteous live by, that when you walk in truth, you don't need to shout. When your heart is clean, you don't need to explain. When your intentions were pure, you don't need to beg to be believed, because God sees motives. And for those who chose to harm innocence, who looked at your sincerity and used it as an opportunity to strike, God saw that too. And what's terrifying is not just that he saw it, but that he will hold them accountable for it, not just for what they did, but for why they did it. In the court of divine justice, there are no loopholes. No lies can be dressed up as kindness. No selfish gain can be hidden beneath good intentions. It all stands bare before the eyes of the one who sees through soul and marrow. So if you're wondering whether your innocence was wasted, whether your goodness was all for nothing, remember this: God doesn't just count deeds, he weighs hearts. And the one who lifted their hand against your innocence will be judged not merely for the strike, but for the pride that fueled it. The pain of being pure in a corrupt world. To be pure in a world that rewards manipulation is to carry a cross not everyone can see. It is to walk among wolves with a lamb's heart. It is to speak truth while others spin lies, and to choose loyalty when betrayal seems easier. And in that purity, you suffer, not because you are weak, but because you refuse to become like them. The pain of being pure is not physical, it is spiritual. It is the loneliness of standing for what is right when everyone else has bowed to convenience. It is the grief of giving love that is never returned, offering peace that is met with war, and choosing silence when every part of you aches to scream. This pain is not ordinary, it is sacred, and it is deep. You didn't ask to be innocent. You didn't wear your heart openly so that it could be broken. You simply loved, in truth, trusted with hope, and believed that goodness would be enough. But they proved you wrong, didn't they? They showed you that even light can be attacked, even honesty can be mocked, even purity can be used as a weapon against itself. They didn't just hurt you, they hurt the part of you that made you beautiful. The part that still believed in kindness, that still forgave without being asked, that still looked for the good even in the worst. And that pain, that's not just emotional, it's spiritual trauma. It's the silent breaking of something sacred. And yet, this pain is not unnoticed. God sees the ones who chose righteousness and were ridiculed for it. He sees the ones who gave without limits and were met with selfishness. He sees the pure in heart who cried in silence because the world couldn't understand their tears. You are not invisible in your pain. You are held in high regard because while the world may trample the pure, heaven treasures them. Your pain is not weakness. It is the price of not compromising. Your tears are not evidence of defeat. They are signs of your endurance, and your suffering does not go unseen. It is stored in the heart of God. He sees it all, and He will respond, not to punish you for being pure, but to honor the purity that cost you everything. Divine record keeping. Heaven doesn't miss a moment. In the stillness of night, when no one else is watching, when the lights are off and the crowd has gone home, heaven is still recording. While people forget your name the moment your usefulness ends, God is taking note of everything. Every hidden deed, every whispered betrayal, every unspoken sorrow carved into the walls of your heart. His record is not built on evidence that can be erased, altered, or misinterpreted. It is complete, it is perfect, and it is eternal. They may have hurt you in ways you cannot explain, through subtle rejection, passive aggression, or a calculated silence that screamed louder than words. And maybe you never found the courage to tell anyone. Maybe your pain was too complex to be believed or too deep to be expressed in words. So you buried it in your soul and walked on like nothing happened. But God didn't miss a single moment. He saw the long nights you spent questioning yourself, blaming your heart for being too soft, too trusting. He saw the strength it took to smile when everything inside you was unraveling. He recorded every step you took to preserve peace, even when it meant sacrificing your own comfort, your dignity, your well-being, and none of that was lost. Not a second of it. Heaven's record is not kept to shame you or to expose you. It's preserved to justify you. It's the silent evidence that one day will speak louder than anything said against you. You don't need to gather witnesses or proof. You don't need to keep score or track offenses, because God has already done it, and His record can't be destroyed, bought, or buried. They thought they were being clever, that by hurting you behind closed doors, by wearing a smile while they twisted the knife, no one would know. But God does. He saw their faces when they thought no one else could. He listened to their private conversations, the mocking laughter, the twisted logic used to excuse the inexcusable. And while they celebrated your pain, God was writing. You must understand the holiness in that. When you chose not to retaliate, when you chose silence instead of revenge, heaven didn't interpret that as weakness. Heaven interpreted it as strength of the highest order. And it documented it. The angels recorded it, and God remembered it. There will come a time, though you cannot predict it and should not chase it, when that record will be unveiled, when those who claimed innocence will be confronted by what they thought was hidden, and what they did in darkness will be judged in light. You don't need to be the one to uncover the truth. You only need to live in truth, trusting that God's documentation is more accurate than any court, more righteous than any jury, and more powerful than any lie that ever tried to erase your story. Why innocence calls out for justice. Innocence is not weakness. It is a sacred force. It is the state of the soul before it is touched by deception, before it is stained by malice, before it is bent into silence by repeated betrayal. When someone harms an innocent heart, they don't merely cause emotional pain. They desecrate something holy. That's why justice is not just a concept to be debated in courtrooms. It is a cry that rises up from the soul and echoes in the halls of heaven. And that cry never goes unheard. When you were kind, when you were trusting, when you were patient and forgiving, they didn't see that as a treasure. They saw it as a weakness to exploit. You gave them something rare and priceless, your honesty, your loyalty, your transparency, and they treated it like it was nothing. They took your soft heart and placed it in the fire just to see how long it would take to burn. That is not mere wrongdoing. That is cruelty toward the divine nature in you. God does not ignore that kind of harm. He created the pure heart, and He defends it fiercely. The soul that cries out not in rage but in heartbreak carries a voice unlike any other. It is the voice of the wounded righteous, and that voice is thunder in the ears of God. You may have been overlooked by everyone else. You may have gone unnoticed, unprotected, unappreciated. But God was there, not only witnessing but grieving with you. And when He grieves, He acts. Not always immediately, not always in the way we expect, but always in perfect timing and in perfect measure. Because when innocence is crushed, justice is inevitable. This world teaches people to be hardened, to put on masks, to shield themselves with bitterness and armor themselves with sarcasm. But your heart remained undefended. You chose to live vulnerably, to trust, to love without reservation. And for that, you were wounded. But don't you dare believe that your wound was meaningless. Your pain is a testimony. Your tears are a language. Your innocence is a beacon. And when it is violated, it sends a signal to heaven. And heaven responds. There is a reason Scripture says, the pure in heart shall see God. It's not because life spares them suffering. It's because their suffering brings them closer to the one who knows what it means to be rejected for being good. The one who came into this world in innocence and was nailed to a cross by those who couldn't handle His light. So when your innocence was used against you, remember, God didn't just see the harm, He felt it as His own. Because when you walk in purity, you reflect His image, and any attack on you is an insult to Him. Justice is not revenge, it is restoration of what is right. And because your heart remained pure through the pain, it will not be forgotten. God's justice is already in motion. Not because you cried out in anger, but because your innocence cried out in silence. God waits, but He never forgets. Time is a strange teacher. It stretches our endurance, tests our faith, and often leaves us wondering whether justice will ever come. In our most painful moments, when the people who hurt us seem to flourish and the wounds they cause still bleed beneath the surface, we whisper, "Has God forgotten?" But what we call delay, heaven calls preparation. God's memory is not like man's. We forget details, revise our stories, or justify our wrongs. But God forgets nothing. Not your silent suffering, not the betrayal they inflicted while looking you in the eye, not the kindness you extended while holding your breath in pain. He waits, yes, but He waits with purpose, not with apathy. Why does He wait? Because He is patient even with the wicked. Because His justice is never rushed, never careless, never driven by rage. It is holy, deliberate, and final. God often gives space for repentance, not to excuse the harm done to you, but to allow every soul the opportunity to choose redemption. That's not injustice, it's mercy. But mercy extended does not mean accountability is forgotten. If they persist in their cruelty, if they harden their hearts instead of softening them, then the same time they were given as a chance to change becomes the rope that measures their fall. To you, the victim of hidden betrayal or open mockery, this waiting may feel like abandonment. You wonder how God could stay silent when they parade their lies like trophies. You watch them walk freely while you limp in the shadows of their decisions. But don't confuse divine stillness with divine absence. In your suffering, you are being refined, and in His silence, God is allowing the story to ripen, so that when justice comes, it is undeniable, unstoppable, and unmistakably divine. The one who hurts without remorse may believe they've escaped consequences, but God is not mocked. The seeds of their cruelty have already been sown, and the harvest will come, not when you say so, but when God deems it right. And when it comes, it will not be a response born of vengeance, but of truth. It will correct the story. It will restore the balance. And it will reveal what you carried silently and honorably all this time. Every day you held your tongue, God wrote it down. Every night you cried alone, He kept a record. Every moment you chose peace over retaliation, you were not alone. He was there, watching, waiting, planning. What they believed was dismissed or forgotten was actually being stored in the very hands of the One who has eternity to answer the cries of the innocent. God waits, but He never forgets. Those who hurt the pure always reap what they sow. There is a law woven into the fabric of creation. What is sown must one day be reaped. It is not a law made by men, so it cannot be avoided by their cunning. It is not a law controlled by institutions, so it cannot be manipulated. This law, divine and incorruptible, governs the universe with a justice that is often silent but never absent. And this is the law that will answer those who hurt the pure. They sowed manipulation while you sowed sincerity. They planted deceit while you gave trust. They watered the soil with lies while you poured your heart out in truth, and perhaps, for a time, it looked as though their garden was the one blooming, praised, promoted, adored by the world. While you withered in quiet pain, they danced in the illusion of victory, but no root of wickedness can hold forever. God is not mocked. Though they may seem successful, though they may gain attention, applause, or even influence, it is all built on sand. Because they sowed poison in secret, and no matter how beautiful the petals, the flower will carry the venom. They cannot plant thorns and harvest fruit. They cannot destroy purity and live in peace. Sooner or later, the consequences come. Sometimes those who harm others don't realize what they've planted until the harvest begins, and when it does, it arrives in forms they never expected. Relationships that fall apart, peace that escapes them, guilt that haunts them in quiet hours, and blessings that vanish like vapor. What they gave will return, not from your hands, but from life itself. That is how divine justice works. It uses the weight of their own actions to bring about their reckoning. You don't have to chase it. You don't have to wish for their downfall. Your job is not to become bitter. Your job is to stay pure, because your innocence is your shield. When they harmed you, they didn't just hurt a person. They trespassed into a sacred space. They touched what God considers holy, a heart that had not yet been stained by hatred. And that violation will not go unanswered. In time, the purity they mocked will become the mirror that shows them their corruption. They will remember the gentleness they laughed at, the love they belittled, the loyalty they crushed, and they will find that they can't replace it. Because what they broke was not easily made. What they threw away was not common. It was rare, and they knew it. But they hurt it anyway. So they will reap, not because you demand it, but because heaven has already set the law in motion, and no one escapes what they've planted. Those who harm the pure cannot outrun the harvest. Your reward is being prepared where they cannot touch it. There is a sacred truth often hidden from the eyes of those who suffer, that not all rewards are delayed and not all pain is in vain. While you were grieving in silence, while the weight of betrayal settled heavy on your chest, something holy was being formed. Every moment you chose to remain kind in the face of cruelty, every time you held your dignity instead of retaliating, you were planting seeds in a realm far higher than this one. A realm untouched by their hands, unseen by their eyes. God does not simply restore what was taken, He multiplies it in a way they cannot intercept. The people who hurt you thought they were closing doors on your life. They thought they were breaking you down beyond repair. What they didn't realize was that God was using those very moments to elevate you in secret. What they meant for harm became raw material in heaven's hands. The pain you endured became purpose. The humility you were forced to walk in became favor wrapped in silence. There is a place where earthly cruelty cannot reach. There is a preparation happening that they cannot sabotage with gossip, manipulation, or deceit. The reward for your innocence is not merely material, it is divine protection, supernatural favor, and peace that doesn't depend on their apology. You are being lifted in ways they will never understand, because what is prepared for you is not meant for public validation. It is meant for eternal preservation. This is the beauty of how God operates. He doesn't just remove you from the storm, He builds a shelter that the storm cannot touch. He doesn't simply silence your enemies, He exalts you in a way that renders their words powerless. They see your rise and cannot trace its source. They see your peace and cannot comprehend its root. Because they were never part of the preparation, they cannot disrupt the promise. It's easy to think that restoration will look like vindication in front of those who wronged you. But sometimes God's greatest reward is not proving you right, it's making you untouchable. It's placing you so far above their reach that their words no longer sting, their presence no longer shakes you, and their memory no longer defines you. They may have mocked your purity, but they can't touch the crown it birthed. They may have rejected your honesty, but they can't unwrite the legacy it's creating. They may have walked away thinking they broke you, but God is building something with your life that no one will be able to take credit for, except Him. So lift your head, not in pride, but in awareness. The reward is real. The journey wasn't wasted, and everything they took for granted is now being returned to you in a form far more valuable than what was lost. They cannot steal it, they cannot block it, they cannot follow you where God is taking you. The reward is not just coming, it's already being prepared, and they won't be invited to the table. There is a kind of strength the world cannot recognize, the strength of the innocent, the unwavering heart that chooses goodness even when surrounded by darkness. You carried that strength, and though they saw it as weakness, God saw it as worship. They chose to hurt you not out of misunderstanding, but out of willful disregard for what was holy within you. But God, who sees all, has taken notice. He saw the innocence they mocked, the loyalty they betrayed, the wounds they inflicted and walked away from. He saw it all, not with the eyes of the world, but with the eyes of eternity. And now, the story is shifting. The justice you waited for is already on its way. The silence you endured is now heaven's courtroom, and every tear you shed has become a testimony. What they did will not go unanswered, not because you demanded retribution, but because God is faithful to those who kept their hands clean while walking through fire. Your reward is certain, your pain has purpose, and the one who saw it all is about to answer in a way that no one can deny. So don't look back to see if they regret it. Look forward, because your rise, your healing, and your future is already unfolding in the hands of the one who never needed proof to believe you. God sees the innocence they took for granted and chose to hurt anyway. And now,